Welcome, everybody. Welcome and hello. My name is Linda Aldori. I'm the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at American University, and I have the distinct honor of welcoming you to this glorious tribute to an organization that has been a beacon of inspiration, imagination, and cultural enrichment for 60 years, the National Endowment for the Arts. I'd like to start by extending my heartfelt gratitude to the primary hosts of this event, Americans for the Arts and the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies. Thank you so much for your spirit of collaboration with AU. Since its founding in 1965 by the National Foundation on the Arts and Humanities Act, which also established the NEH, NEA has upheld a simple yet powerful belief that the arts matters. That creativity is a necessity for maintaining our shared humanity and for creating community. We also wish to note that this is the 50th anniversary of the NEA's research division, which has been a fruitful resource and thought partner with our faculty for many years. We recently celebrated the 50th anniversary of our graduate arts management program, developed in response to the rising importance and impact of cultural institutions in the United States and their need for adaptive and responsible management. This world-class graduate program, directed by none other than Andrew Taylor, who I will be introducing later. Many of you know, it has graduated alumni who succeeded globally and regionally. The graduate program and its mission align perfectly with the mission of the college. We prepare students for lives of purpose, service, and leadership by delivering a rigorous liberal arts education rooted in diverse perspectives and experiential learning. With innovative and inclusive curricula, in 60 undergraduate major degrees, 35 graduate degree programs, and mentorship from 420 full-time faculty in the humanities, arts, social sciences, and sciences. The result is graduates with a mastery of skills in both critical thinking and problem solving, and of course, harnessing creativity. The NEA has helped empower our students and faculty to harness this creativity and has strengthened the value and impact of the arts across the country. We thank the NEA for funding and facilitating creative expression, for sustaining cultural heritage, for championing artistic freedom, and for giving our students and faculty a future where the arts continues to unite us all. Thank you. Now I'm very pleased to introduce the Director of the Arts Management Program, who we all know very well, Andrew Taylor, who will kick off the activities for the evening.
Good evening. Good evening. It's glorious to see you. This day is 60 years in the making. I've only been around, I'm 61, so I've been working on it since I was almost 1 year old. But it's such a joy to have you all here in the room and online as well. I know we have many hundreds of people watching us online, to acknowledge and honor and reflect upon and think back and look forward all at the same time in this very complex moment for many things in the United States. And I just want to acknowledge all the people who are not present in the room, even though I love all the people who are in the room. Among them, we should just acknowledge that we are currently on the unceded land of the Piscataway, the Powhatan, and the Natticoke people, and acknowledge that this city and its wealth in large part were built with indentured and enslaved labor. With those people, we need to honor and reflect and remember the fact that we're standing on the land that they made whole for us. I also want to call into the room all the makers and the culture bearers that informed your lives, that informed our lives, that made space and creative vision for all of us. honoring them, whether or not they received grants, in ways that to recognize there's so many people that have helped us understand who we are, to know ourselves, and to imagine better selves together. So we're here today because 60 years ago to this day, President Johnson signed into law the National Foundation on the Arts and Humanities Act. You can see the first page here. I'm a teacher, I need a visual aid to show things. You'll also, in the digital program on the last page, you'll see a link to the full legislation. It is actually worth a reading because it does express what this grand experiment was about. It was quite unusual for this system that had formed in opposition to many sort of imperial or other forms of government that often had arts deeply entangled with how they did politics in the work to create an arts support agency. And it's worth noting in 1965, which seems to be one of the busiest Congress years ever, this was part of a bundle of legislation that was trying to reimagine the federal government as a resource and an aid to bridge many of the challenges of a struggling and a challenged country. Just some of the things formed as part of the Great Society, which was President Johnson's bundle of legislation: the Job Corps, Food Stamp Act, Medicaid and Medicare were launched in 1965, the Voting Rights Act also in 1965, Immigration and Nationality Act also in 1965. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act, which another version was passed in 1968, and Public Broadcasting Act was in 1967. All of these together formed a new vision for the federal government, which we're going to explore today. And I think Philip Kennicott wrote a great piece on the Washington Post on the 50th anniversary, where he called all these a vast transportation bill meant to convey America through a moral, intellectual, and aesthetic landscape, which I think is a really compelling way of thinking about this work. So today we have a bunch of things happening, and we're really grateful to have you in the room on this. We have an initial conversation. My friend Holly Sidford always has a great structure of the what, so what, now what? So we're going to sort of follow that. First up, we're going to have a what conversation. So what is this agency? We're going to hear from Sunil and Ayanna, talk about its history and its purpose and its programming. We'll have a break to watch a short video. We did video interviews with all 7 living NEA chairs. We've created a compilation video that we're going to share with you in that break. All of the longer video forms will also be available starting tonight online, so you can watch those as well. It was great joy talking to all of them. And then we're going to have a panel discussion on the so what, now what. And the so what is, so what happened? What can we sort of trace back about what came out of this initial idea and the ongoing programming of the National Endowment for the Arts? And now what, which is how do we think and look forward together? I'm excited for that as well. I just want to maybe invoke into the room some of the words from this opening legislation, because I think they really compellingly convey at least the idea behind this big move. I won't read all of it, don't worry. Congress hereby finds and declares that the encouragement and support of national progress of scholarship in the humanities and the arts, while primarily a matter for private and local initiative, is also an appropriate matter of concern to the federal government. There's some gendered language in here, I'm just letting you know. That a high civilization must not limit its efforts to science and technology alone, but must give full value and support to the other great branches of man's scholarly and cultural activity. That democracy demands wisdom and vision in its citizens, and that it must therefore foster and support a form of education designed to make men masters of their technology and not its unthinking servant. That's certainly ripe right now. That it is, yes, let's just do this one. That the practice of art and the study of the humanities require constant dedication and devotion, and that while no government can call a great artist or scholar into existence, it is necessary and appropriate for the federal government to help create and sustain not only a climate encouraging freedom of thought, imagination, and inquiry, but also the material conditions facilitating the release of that creative talent. So good stuff, right? So that said, everything we do is an experiment, and this has been a 60-year experiment, and this 60-year anniversary is an opportunity both to celebrate and reflect and critique if we need to, and think about where this experiment brought us, and think about what this experiment might evolve into. And I guess I want to just close before I invite our speakers up, and maybe Sunil and Ayanna, you can start up and I will introduce you, is to acknowledge we've been talking about policy and abstraction and government. Really, we're talking about humans who are doing work to try and make the world better for other humans, and just to honor the extraordinary labor and effort that went into this great experiment and continues there today. With that, I'm going to introduce Ayanna Hudson and Sunil Iyengar. And they're here to sort of talk us through the beginnings, the formations, and the reasons, and the actions of the National Endowment. As you'll see in the bios, if you look online, Ayanna's Chief Programs Officer at Americans for the Arts, who was a longtime civil servant supporting the extraordinary NEA in its past. Sunil is the Director of Office and Research Analysis, which you heard is having their 50th anniversary. Sunil, you look great. Sunil must have started there when he was 10. And I welcome you to have your conversation. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you,
Welcome,
man.
everybody.
And thank you, Andrew. And it's such a pleasure to be here. Hi, good to see you all. And what it's a difficult time, but yet a joyous time. And so it's wonderful to gather. I see so many colleagues, friends in the room. Look forward to giving you hugs after this. Look forward to meeting new friends as well. And it is such an honor and privilege to be here with my dear, dear friend, Sunil.
Great to be here. Thank you so much. I feel the same way.
Thank you. Sunil and I, as we'll talk about, really I had the honor and privilege to work very closely with Sunil for my 13 years at the National Endowment for the Arts. And so we thought we'd start by giving just a brief overview of kind of what our careers have been and what led us to the NEA and some of the work that we do at the NEA and then where we are now. And if you don't mind, Sunil, I'll just kind of kick us off.
Okay, sure. Well, just to echo, big thanks to American University, Americans for the Arts, and the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies. And one of our NEA chairs, Jane Chu, used to say, she would travel a lot and she would say, when you've seen one community, what have you seen? And the answer was always, you've just seen one community. So in that spirit, I just want to say I'm one person from the NEA here before you today, the current NEA, but I really want to tip my hat or give a large group hug, virtual group hug to all my current colleagues at the NEA who are really trying to do the best they can to continue to adhere to the legislative roots of the agency. And also to chair nominee Marianne Carter, really for all of them have just done, it's a privilege to work with them. But also to thank former NEA staff and political leadership as well. And even going back further, those who maybe were here even before, in my case, I joined the NEA. So I joined the NEA about 19 years ago. I'd spent about a decade in journalism, covering the health sector, biomedical research, and you wouldn't think that's an obvious fit for the NEA, but I really have to thank Chairman Dana Gioia, as well as Eileen Mason, who saw something in me to allow me to proceed through the interview process and make it as the director of the Office of Research and Analysis. And I also want to thank, in that vein, working now, I've been there, as I said, about 19 years. So I've worked with about definitely five chairs from both administrations, as well as 4 acting chairs. And of course, all the political leadership that was with them, as well as the program and administrative staff, which I'm one, of course, throughout that period. So I kind of, through that process and, really learned a lot about the mission of the NEA. And so I have my phone here because I was going to read a couple of things, but Andrew, thank you for getting that and lodged in our head. I won't read them again, but I do urge everyone to go back and look at the legislation.
And we'll talk a little bit about that,
Right.
Neil, and break it down. But just a brief overview of who I am. Again, Ayanna Hudson. I currently serve as the Chief Programs Officer at Americans for the Arts. Prior to joining Americans for the Arts, I spent 13 years at the Arts Endowment. I served under the Obama administration, the first Trump administration, the Biden administration, and a little bit of time under the second Trump administration. I worked at the LA County Arts Commission for 11 years prior to that, and 7 years at the Fulton County Department of Arts and Culture, where I'll just note the very first project that I worked on was a national demonstration project funded by the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with Americans for the Arts, 2 other local arts agencies really measuring the impact of the arts in reducing risky behavior in youth. And so it's all come full circle. But enough about us, and let's dive into our conversation, Sunil.
Sure.
I thought I start by just grounding ourselves in our conversation and the foundation of the agency itself. And Andrew did lift up and really talk about and highlight some of the key points and principles of the founding legislation. But I really want to ask you and have us engage in a brief conversation. What is the unique value that the NEA provides the American people, and how does it connect back to the agency's founding legislation?
Right. So the first stave or the line of the legislation is the arts and humanities belong to all the people in the United States. So that right there translates to the fact that the NEA is set up to ensure that all communities, big and small, urban, rural, all throughout the country, all 50 states and the territories have access to high quality arts experiences, arts education. When I say experiences, either as creators, learners, or as audience members, for example. And I just want to say, despite the kind of the rise of technology and all the various options people have to do other things, to do even in the arts, we can't take for granted. And I think the legislation was set up with the recognition that we can't take for granted that everyone has access to artworks or artistic endeavors that might be considered excellent or the best of their kind. So when I say excellent here, I'm referring again to the legislation, which talks about artistic excellence, models of excellence, and it talks about merit. And in invoking those terms, just to realize this comes back on all of us. I mean, how do grants get determined historically? It's through what I really consider the crown jewel of the NEA, our panel review system. So that is to say, citizen experts from around the country that really reflect the depth and breadth of the general population, and all the dynamics of that, the range of cultures, tastes, and perspectives come together, and they review our applications for us. And I know how much work you put into, Ayanna, when you were there, beating the bushes and getting reviewers from all kinds of backgrounds. But ultimately, of course, the chair has the final say, and it goes through our National Council of the Arts as well. But that root review process is so crucial to what eventually gets funded. And that then kind of gives a seal of approval, if you will. I don't want to sound authoritarian, but a sort of seal, let's say, that kind of gives confidence to other funders, truly. There is, of course, a match requirement, which is part of the legislation as well. So our grants, for every dollar or so, they have to match it by $1 that they raise on their own, the grantees. And we find that at the end of the day, when these projects close out, we've often well exceeded the $1 match, that we somehow were able to incentivize much more giving. Chair Carter gave a really interesting research project to us. It was to find out how do NEA dollars look across the country relative to philanthropy. That's a very hard question. But what we were able to do is get the data from the top 1,000 foundations by size and look at what they gave to the arts. And when you look at that, now the amount may be bigger in terms of the total number of foundations in this country in terms of dollars versus the NEA, but in fact, the distribution of that is that 1 in 5 US counties, that's 22%, or I think about close to 700 counties, host recipients of NEA dollars, but not of private foundation or community foundation dollars. So that really, to me, speaks to a big need. Also, you've seen these stats before, Ayanna. It's maybe coming back to you, but 1/3 of our project activities occur in high poverty areas. Most of our grants go to small or mid-sized organizations that need that funding. So I say all that and also want to add, none of this could be possible without our state and regional partners. So I know Pam Breaux here, you're going to hear from her soon, but really hats off to the state arts agencies that amplify our work and extend it and enable us to make the dollars go as far as they can.
Great.
What about you?
Thanks, Sunil. I want to just piggyback on one thing that you mentioned in terms of the overall impact of the Arts Endowment and its funding and its reach. Can you also just highlight a little bit about rural America and how the NEA is the largest funder of the arts in rural America?
Yeah, and that's another thing. So basically, I think it's like 12% or so. I may not have the most recent numbers. 12 to 14% of these communities are rural, or people live in rural populations, and that's about on par with what we've historically funded as well in terms of our grant funding. So it's. I think we're doing all we can to get out into those communities, and we'll get into this probably, but it could. I mentioned NASA, National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, and state arts agency partners, all those state agency, regional arts organizations, state arts agencies. We also have local arts agencies that redistribute funds that we give. We also have other partners that we've made over time where we've created programs, regional re-granting programs. So a lot of that really, and these are experts at processing and ensuring that the grant money goes as far as it can into rural areas as well.
Great, thank you. So I also looked at the legislation. So Andrew, wherever you are, I read the legislation, and it was fascinating to read it after not having read it for a little while, and to remind myself how bold it is, how visionary, and how deeply inspirational. So I want to highlight a couple of things that resonated with me. I also noted the arts and humanities belong to all the people of the United States, not some of the people, all of the people. And so that deeply resonated with me because, as I mentioned, I've spent, my entire career really thinking about access for all. And so that really stands out to me, and everything that you talked about in terms of the reach of the agency and some of the statistics that you noted really speak to that principle of the legislation. The other principle that really resonated with me, the arts and humanities reflect the high place accorded by the American people to the nation's rich cultural heritage and to the fostering of mutual respect for the diverse beliefs and values of all persons and groups. That resonates with me just because of where we are at this moment in this country. And if I'm remembering correctly, it was under the first Trump administration where that language, fostering mutual respect for the diverse beliefs and values of all persons and groups, was added to the funding guidelines. And then under the Biden administration, there was such a big emphasis on funding projects that were bringing communities together to help understand, not just celebrate, but to help understand difference and to create thriving communities through the arts based on difference, but the arts bringing people together. Americans should receive in school background and preparation in the arts. Of course, as former director of arts education and having spent almost my entire career in arts education, that resonates with me very deeply. And, you talked about the investment in states and regions and locals, and that's really, that public funding infrastructure across the country. And I think, so often when people think about the National Endowment for the Arts, we think about the direct grants to communities, which are hugely important, right? And all the stats that you noted in terms of the reach of the arts across the country and increasing access. But I think as importantly is that infrastructure that you talked about. So there's that public funding infrastructure. You mentioned states, regions, locals, and the funding that the agency provides for those organizations to re-grant and to do direct programming. And putting my arts education hat on for a moment, thinking about the other ways that the agency really supports the infrastructure across the country. So for arts education, the National Endowment for the Arts invests nationally through the Arts Education Partnership, administered by Education Commission of the States, but a national hub to advance the arts across the country. It also strategically invests at the state level professional development, leadership capacity for arts education directors at state arts agencies and arts education directors at state education agencies. And then it also invests, of course, in local communities across the country. And I think that infrastructure that the agency supports, and these are just two examples that we're talking about, I think is critically important to understand in terms of the role of the agency and the unique value of the agency. And then I just want to highlight one other thing that really stood out to me in the legislation, that the agency shall carry out a program stimulating artistic activity and awareness and broadening public access to the arts in rural and inner city areas and other areas that are underserved artistically. And you talked about that some. And if I'm also remembering correctly, I'm kind of dusting off the cobwebs here, even though I've been gone a couple of months, thinking about even the work in arts education. And I remember us sitting down and going through some of the data. And I think it's like 80% of arts education funding serves underserved communities, really working to increase access in schools and communities where the arts don't exist. So that also just resonated with me with
And
the
places with Title I schools and also and all that.
exactly, exactly. And so I think it's hugely important to think about the added value of the agency from that lens as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you know, I can't resist. I mean, I'm going to say it anyway, even though Andrew already quoted from this. But I was thinking of when, you know, he was talking about 1965 and when the agency was created. If you think about the time, you know, there was the height of the Cold War. There was this kind of race to the moon. You know, there's all this, and so it was really interesting and kind of prescient, as he said, the language about, you know, kind of the NEA can't, or the government can't rest on solely upon superior power, wealth, and technology, but must be a leader in the realm of ideas and the spirit, rather the nation. It was about America. And then also that line you heard about making people of all backgrounds and wherever located masters of their technology and not unthinking servants. So there's a lot in there to unpack. And the reason I say this is because, you know, we did talk a lot about grant making and some other things, but really the chair has a lot of leverage and power to initiate and promote and change programs. And so one of the things that you hear about is, in addition to our grant making, we have what are called national or leadership initiatives, national initiatives, right? And so there are a lot of them that have come, and some of them we're probably not going to have time to mention, that happened way before our watch at the NEA. But there's some now that are very enduring. And I just wanted to get your thoughts, I guess, maybe Ayanna, on maybe you can tell people a little bit about these, national programs or national initiatives, and if there are any of you that are your favorites, or what kind of made them stick in your view.
So first, let me just start by reflecting for a moment. So we talked about grant making and we talked about re-granting and all of those efforts, initiatives that enables the agency to serve millions of people, right, through the arts. So through the national initiatives and these national partnerships, really thinking about how to expand the reach beyond what's offered through the grant making. And as I was reflecting and really thinking about, again, kind of, I guess, the value added of national initiatives and partnerships, thinking about not only how does it expand the reach of the agency, but also it's an opportunity to serve really specific constituencies. And you talked about the priorities of the chairs, and I think this comes in as well. So as I think about a couple of national initiatives that stand out to me, I think about Blue Star Museums, partnership with Blue Star Families, and if again I'm remembering correctly.
And I think those were under, they're all
Under
but that happened under Chair Landisman and
under the Obama
and,
administration.
yes, and Joan Chikakawa.
And creative, and it's really the start of Creative Forces, right? Creative arts therapy for veteran populations. Those are two that stand out, both because of the types of partnerships they are, but also, again, serving a very specific constituency, military population, which obviously is an important constituency to serve, but also a really important constituency for Congress as well. I also think about historically Black colleges. And Sunil, you'll remember that work really started under the first Trump administration. And there was a real concerted effort to ensure that HBCUs were able to receive the resources of the federal government. And so there was an executive order that the president had just signed. It came across Chairman Carter's desk. I think she asked me about it in a meeting. I did some research, and the next thing I knew, we were launching a whole new initiative that then continued under the next administration. So what stands out to me in terms of how these initiatives endure, even when they start under one administration and then carry over, and I'll talk a little bit in a moment about the Arts Education Partnership, which is carried over 30 years, which is unheard of in multiple administrations. I think when a chair can see how their strategic priorities can fit within a national initiative, and even if there's tweaks along the way that they make, that's one of the practices I think that, as I reflect on this, that I've seen in terms of how these national initiatives can endure. Making sure that as the work continues, like I said, it's tweaked a little bit here, it's tweaked a little bit there to fit and to match and to really align with the priorities of a new administration. And I would say, I think my biggest lesson learned over the last, X number of years in trying to tweak national initiatives is really congressional buy-in and congressional support. And that's where we've seen a lot of, I think it's about 12 national initiatives that the agency has, including the ones that I've mentioned. And over time, continued investment from Congress to be able to do this work. But as you said, the chair really has a lot of power, a lot of leadership that he or she can provide in using an existing framework and an existing program to meet his or her strategic objectives in alignment with the new administration.
Yeah, that's true. I just want to kind of name check some of them. I won't get all the national initiatives in here, but, before I arrived, of course you still have Jazz Masters and National Heritage Fellowships, which are really important. But we also had, under Dana Joy, the Big Read, Poetry Out Loud, Shakespeare in American Communities, which now has a juvenile justice component. Our Town, Blue Star Museums, as you said, Creative Forces, which maybe we'll talk about briefly later, and the Musical Theater Songwriting Challenge, just a few of them. And one of the things I learned, it's very similar to what you said, is I found that all the chairs were really interested in prototyping or piloting these things. And here's where the research hat comes into play. Is like they were interested in the early data, like what did we find about how the uptake of these programs, and that's where we would get in on the ground floor with the research and try to help if we could with that. And then there was really shrewd, I think, in a good way, marketing and promotion through our strategic partners too. So there was a lot of that had to happen. But I think I think the stickiness, if you will, of these national initiatives really falls back on, as you were saying, I think the chair usually has a clear vision of what she or he wants, and then mobilizes staff and excites the staff and leadership to execute on bringing, artistically excellent products and processes to scale, I guess. And this is always with the input of program discipline experts. So I think that's really crucial. And as I said before, you have to have a strong partner where it won't, really get off the ground. I do think what you said about the chair being an advocate and articulating the value of this to Congress and taking it to the people is so important. And that's, I think, why some of these have been written into legislative reports, and that's, they're still sticking.
And direction, congressional
exactly.
direction to continue. Right. And I just want to piggyback for a moment on, you mentioned Shakespeare in American Communities updated to serve a juvenile justice, students in the juvenile justice system under the first Trump administration. Thinking about that also under the Biden administration and Chair Jackson's leadership, also, again, same program, same framework, updated under the Trump administration in one way, and then under Chair Jackson's leadership, being able to update it in another way, leaning still into the juvenile justice component, but also adding that apprenticeship component as well. So again, that just speaks to the leadership of the chair to be able to really shape those national initiatives that have endured over many, many, many years.
That's great. I hope people don't mind me. I'm looking at my phone, but I'm not trying to, not playing a game or anything. I'm trying to,
How are we doing on time?
Oh, well, 6:40, are we doing it? I think we got 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Well, the reason I'm looking at my phone is because there's occasional language I want to weave into this from legislation and so forth. So here's a quote. Okay, I'm going to start this off with a quote. The quote is, "In my time, partnerships were forged with the Interior Department to bring the arts into public parks, with the Veterans Administration to bring the arts and artists into hospitals, with the Small Business Administration to expand art in public places, with the State Department to give emphasis abroad to American creativity, and with the Department of Education." And I was just remembering Chair Jackson would talk about the NEA being a national resource, particularly even within the federal government. But this quote is actually from Livingston Biddle, the late Livingston Biddle, and he served as chair from 77 to 81. So this has been going on for a while. Like the NEA has been trying to, and it was accentuated, I think, by recent chairs, this need to kind of, to really help other agencies meet their mission Even though we're a relatively small agency, I think we pride ourselves on being nimble, at
Yes.
least my colleagues do, and find ways to work with these other agencies to to meet sometimes the administration mission or the issues of the day, to solve those issues. So I guess my question to you is, yeah, I guess federal partnerships. I know you've done some of those. What are your thoughts on, like, anything you want? Federal part? No, anything you want to, like, lift up, anything in particular there?
I keep coming back to arts education.
That's fine.
Um,
Allowed. That's a big
but
part of the legislation too.
it's a huge part of the legislation. So I hope your homework today, everyone reads the legislation, but it is a big part of the legislation, speaks to the importance of it. But I want to go back. I mentioned the Arts Education Partnership earlier, and I think it is unheard of. I think it is unprecedented. And you tell me if there's something that has a longer tenure, but a 30-year partnership between the National Endowment for the Arts and the U.S. Department of Education, jointly conceived under the Clinton administration to create an entity that would become the nation's hub for arts education. And how many administrations is that since 1995 when it was created? And what's fascinating about this partnership, and thinking about how it's funded, jointly funded, and there's always an equal match, right? If the U.S. Department of Education, if they increase their investment, then the NEA would match. If the NEA was increasing their investment, the U.S. Department of Education would match. So over time, the funds have increased. So now it's, I think it's still the largest arts education investment of the National Endowment for the Arts. But I just think it is unparalleled and unheard of for that 30-year partnership to sustain. And when we think about what we talked about earlier as it relates to the priorities of the chair, well, I think one of the successful strategies has really been for the chairs to be able to also embed their priorities within this partnership. So there's always shared priorities between the agencies. For example, under the first Trump administration, I recall priorities around school choice and charter schools. And there was a lot of research and the role of the arts. AEP was taking on a lot of research about the role of the arts in charter schools and the school choice movement. I think during that time also juvenile justice was added, and then under Chair Jackson's leadership, there was a huge emphasis obviously on data and research around arts education. But 30 years is a really long time, and within the climate of the federal government, and I know there have been federal partnerships that have come and that have gone, the lasting impact of this work, I think, is incredible and unparalleled. So that obviously comes to mind. I'll mention too, and Sunil, you and I worked really closely on this, making sure that the NEA was part of the Federal Interagency Working Group for Youth Programs, which was I don't know if it's still in existence, but all of the federal agencies, departments who were working on behalf of youth would get together. And remember, we weren't members of it, right? And I think we found out about it through the work we were doing at the time with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And we were like, we need to be a part of this. I think we might have invited ourselves to this group, but we became a mainstay, and we were successful in helping other federal agencies working on behalf of youth to really understand the impact and the importance of including the arts in all of their programming, all of their initiatives, and setting arts and creativity as one of the outcomes for the work taking place across the federal government on behalf of youth. So that also stands out as a really effective partnership.
Yeah, and one of the things about that is it's not just us feds sitting around this table. We would bring guest speakers from our grantees or people we knew out in the field to really influence the conversation and to be able to be part of the conversation. I mean, that was so important. So it was, oftentimes that was the real draw, right? To
Right.
bring the artist or bring the person who's working with those communities to talk about that.
But then to have meaningful conversations with the federal agencies about the role of the arts and how the arts could be
Absolutely.
included in the work that they were doing to help them reach their strategic goals.
Totally. And the only thing I would add to that, I guess, is that I've seen in the last, I guess since I've been here, but it started, with Dana Joy has had this thing called Operation Homecoming. It was a program, Operation Homecoming, which was a series of writers' workshops on military bases. And, it led to a book. It was very well received by Congress, et cetera. And, in that, you started to see warriors and soldiers coming back with a sense of, something that has transformed them from a health perspective. And I think that was one of the first times I've seen arts, and I know this has been going on for decades, but seeing how arts and health really, coexist. I mean, in such a natural way, mutually enforcing way. And so it's that program, and even in his administration, there was interest in brain research and science of the brain. And then we moved into a program, Creative Forces, which came out of the next administration and carried on ever since. And most recently, I guess, our current, chair nominee, had actually expanded that into communities too. So we have Creative Forces, which is one of the Signal national initiatives, which, if you don't know, it puts creative arts therapies at the center of patient care for military-connected individuals, people and their families. And it does so through a partnership with Departments of Defense and Veterans Affairs. So that's another really good one where there's more than I could say about that than we have time for. But Bill O'Brien, who's currently heading that, if you ever want to reach out to him, he'd be glad to share stats on that. But that's one of the programs. No, that's a major program. And so arts and health is one of these strands that I know our current leadership is interested in. Same, obviously, Maria was. Before that, of course, Jane Chu, and also, again, Rocco and Lensman and Joan Chikawa, and also, of course, Marianne Carter when she was there the first time. So it's really stuck with us, this arts and health, and that's part of the research we do as well.
And just to piggyback off of that, and you might want to tease this out a little bit more, I mentioned earlier just the importance of congressional leadership on this as well as a really important constituency.
Yeah, I mean, so that's where, having a good congressional affairs rep, I think those are indispensable at the agency, the liaison. We currently have Bo Bryant, we're really excited to work with, has just joined. We also have, there's other kinds of, there's all kinds of opportunities to go out there to the districts and show the work that you're doing. And I think one of the things that's been really successful is doing grant workshops. And as you said, underrepresented areas, but often, inviting the congressional leadership and also going to the Hill and talking about, look, we fund this project that happens to be in your backyard. And, did you know what we're doing there? And that education is so important. So obviously we don't advocate, but we do, the chair does educate. And we all try to do that through research and data as well.
Wonderful. I know our time is getting short, and I want to ask you, because today also is the 50th
Well, I don't know about today, but
anniversary of.
I was just thinking, we were talking about this. It's the 50th year since there's an actual research function established at the NEA in terms of an office. I mean, it's transformed a lot over the years, to be sure. But, that was something, even I was going back and you talk about history, the memo that, I guess his name, August Henscher, does anyone know who that is? August Henscher, I hope I pronounced that right, Heckscher, I'm on TV. He basically he wrote the memo to President Kennedy, sort of about how, kind of the concept of government, arts and government. And one of the things he had in it was the idea we need better statistics and research about the arts. And that's obviously not in that language is not in our legislation. But if you look at our legislation, it does talk about research, planning, and surveys. And it also talks about the need to help people understand and appreciate the arts. And part of that appreciation may be cerebral, right? I mean, most of what we experience in the arts, you may not need to see the science or the statistics, but we do think that's an important field of endeavor to cultivate the research about why the arts matter. Also, just to understand the arts infrastructure in this country. And so we try to, collect reliable data on that and to work with our federal partners, but also do it through other means. And we also give grants in this category, which is a relatively new development too.
And I recall how closely we worked together when I was at the agency, both as arts education director, as acting deputy chair, and as chief strategy programs and engagement officer. And through the work that we did together, you really helped me to better understand data and to really appreciate data-driven decision-making. And so let's maybe wind up our remarks by talking a little bit about the importance not only of research and data externally, right, in terms of the research reports and the grant making, but also internally, the role that a research office can play, just even programmatically. And I know I appreciated our work together on, for example, developing a logic model for our collective impact funding category. We worked together on really thinking strategically about national arts education data through our SDIP, State Data Infrastructure Project. And then really working very closely together to help the agency as a whole better understand the key performance indicators of the strategic plan and really working to build overall kind of a culture of data-driven decision-making, not just in terms of leadership, but across the entire agency. So any thoughts or reflections
Yeah.
on
Well,
that as
to
well?
some extent, I mean, we're here to celebrate I guess, thank you for the establishment of the NEA, but also, this is good government. I mean, this is part of other legislation sort of speaks about this. So there's something called the Evidence-Based Decision-Making Act, Evidence Act. There's also, even in different administrations, this most recent one there's a executive order on what's called gold standard science. And there's a lot of language in there that I think is supportive of the cause of using data to make decisions as a federal agency. And so we have to do that to really be as, to reach those who aren't being served and understand and diagnose the field from that perspective as a funder. And also as I've said, to kind of ensure that people have knowledge of what the arts can do for society and for people. A lot of that is anecdotal and is great, and through stories. And I would never say get rid of the stories, but I think we do need to continue to cultivate rigorous data and evidence about the arts so that those who are maybe more swayed by those factors have something to go to. And also we do it in a fairly, we do this in a way that is not ideologically driven or making a point. We're obviously an arts agency, but we are doing this in like using in an academic kind of rigorous way. To your point, though, one of the pleasing things of working at the NEA in recent years has been how program staff and administrative staff are all kind of just wonderful partners and collaborators on looking at data and examining what it means for them. And so you were certainly that, Ayanna, so thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for your partnership, Sunil. And I think we're at time.
I think we are.
So one final question, looking back at your time at the NEA, and I guess for me too, looking back at my time at the NEA, what's one moment or incident that has carried the most meaning for you and what has stuck with you to this day?
Okay, so I was fairly early on in my tenure at the NEA, and frankly, before I joined the NEA, I didn't know all that much about it. And I educated myself pretty rapidly and wished more people knew about it. When I came to the NEA, I won't say which national initiative, but I was just going through a list of these national initiatives we had. I was actually there to evaluate it as a part of a team. We were evaluating, did a site visit and looked at this, and it was in a southwestern state, very rural population. And I went there and I didn't know what to expect. And I just was bowled over by how the arts brought the community together in that town. I mean, this was a group that had never received federal funding. That town, I don't think federal funding had come to that town before, much less to the arts. And it really elicited this community pride. You saw religious leaders, you saw leaders of businesses, you saw all get together and celebrate through the arts. There's sort of this particular arts initiative, and it was just this sort of galvanizing of the local initiative and creativity. I mean, we don't just drop money, we don't just fund people to do arts. I mean, we don't just bring the arts to people, we elicit the arts too through funding, I think. And so it was wonderful to see that we were able to kind of be a conduit to that. And that's the conversion factor. I mean, I was already at the NEA, but this was when I really became a believer, to see that the NEA funding can go so far and actually make a palpable difference in people's lives and how they feel about their surroundings.
So I was going to close with one story, but yours made me think of something else. Just thinking about the overall kind of impact of the agency. And I recall being in Alabama and being there for almost about a week and starting at the top of the state and with our partners at the State Arts Council and driving all the way to the bottom of the state and stopping at different cities in between. Birmingham, Huntsville, Tuscaloosa. And I wanted to do that trip because we had invested in the development of a statewide plan for arts education for the state of Alabama. And this was an outgrowth of our Education Leaders Institute. And then our collective impact funding led to the development of the plan. So Alabama is making good progress, but Mac McCutcheon, who was the Speaker of the House of the state legislature in Alabama, who was a huge Republican, huge supporter of arts education, was so impressed by the state plan for arts education, he then used his power and influence to leverage investment from the state. So the NEA invested in the development of the plan, and the state legislature funded the establishment of 3 arts education centers across the state. So my visit there was to really better understand the dynamics at play there. I was going to talk about something else, but as you mentioned that, I think that also speaks to, you know, the bipartisan nature of this
and-
work, which we really haven't teased out a whole lot,
Yeah.
but I was so impressed by his commitment and his, again, using his personal influence to leverage state funding for arts education, which is, I think, a model for other states, but all based on the initial funding from the Arts Endowment.
Absolutely. And the forging of new partnerships, like you'll find in communities, people who haven't worked together, get together to support a particular project. That's really wonderful. Well, thanks. Are we at time?
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sunil and Ayanna, both for this moment and for the extraordinary gifts and grit you brought to this work over many years. Thank you. I don't want to break my leg. So we have a couple things to do, but just for housekeeping, DC traffic being what it is, we still have people coming in. So if it is easy for you to move toward the middle and leave some space, some seats on the aisle, it would be a great thing to do in this moment. If it's not easy for you, I understand. But if you're able to move in a little bit and make some space, we do have people standing and I want to have them sit down. There's a couple up here that can be taken. And just before we begin the next thing, it just occurs to me to take a minute. So I would encourage you to sort of reach into your mind and think of someone who nurtured or fostered or inspired some sort of creative energy in yourself. This could be an elder, it could be a teacher, it could be a sibling, could be anything, a perfect person on a stage. Call them to your mind. If there's more than one, just pick one. If you're playing this game at home, please do this as well. And then just see if you can hold their name in your mind. And when I count to 3, we're going to say it into the room, just to sort of bring forward for this video, which I think will be helpful. So if you have somebody in your head, I'm going to count to 3. You can whisper, you can scream, you can do what you want. So let's hear their names at 1, 2, 3. All right. Welcome into the room. It's nice to see you. As part of this project, and again, with the extraordinary partnership of Americans for the Arts and the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, we had the opportunity to interview all 7 living chairs of the National Endowment for the Arts. And we're going to show you now a short 5-minute video compilation that was put together that I think sort of brings their voices into the room in really important and powerful ways. And then we're going to have a panel after. So I don't know if it feels safe for you guys to come while this video is going. If you want to watch and come up after, you make that choice. But now can we play the short video? It's got about 5 minutes.
We must remember what LBJ said. Art is a nation's most precious heritage, the inner vision which guides, and where there is no vision, the people perish.
It's not only that art transcends politics, it's that I think makes the politics of all of this less important as people start to communicate with each other and bond and engage in common purposes.
Without access to the arts, our own creative expression, the creative expression of other humans, the ability to be curious about each other and hear each other's stories, we can't have a working democracy.
The vision for the NEA began under JFK. It was to decentralize the arts from the great urban areas of America, like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles at the time.
Underneath all of that was the firm belief that the arts have something to offer, and that none of the other dimensions of government could actually do their best work without the integration of arts, culture, and design.
The National Endowment for the Arts was established to say, we love America, we love American heritage, we want to celebrate the USA and our heritage, and we believe it's important enough that the federal government should have an entity where we can promote this.
It grew in its influence, and I think has played through those 60 years a really central role in this remarkable evolution of nonprofit cultural work.
They realized they didn't want a European system or Latin American system where the Ministry of Culture was an extension of politics. And so they created a different system which gave these institutions independence of the political process.
First Amendment rights have always been very important to me as an actress, freedom of expression, because the arts cannot exist without freedom to create.
I found almost immediately that the staff at the National Endowment for the Arts were so dedicated to connecting people and answering any questions. And we used to adapt a mantra by saying, when you've seen one community, you've only seen one community.
Everywhere I went, I was greeted by people who loved the arts in their backyards. It was the people of America who really let their legislators know from then on that they didn't want this agency gone.
I spent the first 100 days talking to everybody in Washington. I came up with the National Endowment for the Arts was the official arts agency of the US government. It was dedicated to bringing the best of arts and arts education to all Americans. Immediately, our relationship with the public and with Congress changed.
NEA funding goes out to every congressional district across the country. We had a council. To this day, I couldn't tell you the politics of the different members of our council at the NEA. So there's a tremendous history there of bipartisanship or unpartisanship, which I think is very important.
There is something where the public dollars can create a framework for others to participate, whether they're in government or they're in private sectors.
Public agency serves the public. It's just democratic common sense.
The NEA isn't just a funder, it is a national resource. And that our ability to have a national view that allows us to understand what is happening in these extremely diverse communities.
We don't just say, let the marketplace take care of the national parks or the national defense. Arts are something fundamental to who we are, fundamental to our humanity. And we need art that is protected from the demands of the marketplace, of whether it's going to make money or not.
Well, we invest public dollars in the arts because personal creative practice, engaging artistic expression, is a central component of the good life in an American democracy.
And so the idea is obviously, let's celebrate ourselves as a nation, but let's not forget that we all come from somewhere. And we have wonderful local culture as well.
Once you see how many ways from being a culture bearer, from being a way to bring economic vitality and community vitality within a city, a community, and even rural areas, then we start seeing the vast array of ways that the arts permeate our lives and can celebrate and make us feel like we belong.
turn this on now. Is this working? Yes, hello. So yes, great thanks to Rob Shore and his team at Picture This Productions who produced this for us. Good job, Rob. Anywhere you like. All right. We have some wonderful guests here. And first, I just really wanted to thank our collaborative partners on this, Americans for the Arts, National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, who have been extraordinary in helping make this all happen. So we did the what? Remember the structure? We're doing what, and now there's so what, and then there's now what. We're gonna have a little so what moment, like what was the actual impact? But first, I thought let's start with each of you, because you each serve and connect with a different aspect of the arts community. And you can introduce yourself and your organization, and then tell us a little bit about the trajectory of that part of the world and its relation to the NEA. How's that?
Happy to start. Hi, everybody. I'm Pam Breaux with NASA, the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies. And my part of the world is about serving state arts agencies. NASA, first of all, is the National Service Organization for States. We were created by state arts agencies 57 years ago to serve them, to strengthen them. That's our mission, strengthening state arts agencies. Simple but critical. Last year, we celebrated 56 years of serving the nation's 56 state and jurisdictional arts councils in lovely Puerto Rico. So it was quite a celebration. So state arts agencies predate the NEA. We've talked a lot about 1965 being a really critical seminal year, and it was. The first state arts agency came into being in 1899. That was Utah, when the state was a mere 3 years old, right? So even at 3 years old, Utah knew the importance of arts in public policy, right? That was followed in 1902 by Minnesota. I'm not going to go through every state. I will tell you that by the time the NEA was established in 65, we had 18 state arts agencies across the country. And state governments were investing at that time across the 18 about $1.9 million in state arts agencies. That's a little different today. With 56 state governments are now investing $650 million in their agencies. But so we had 18 before the NEA, then the NEA was established, and then it only took 10 years for the rest of the state and jurisdictional arts agencies to come along. So in 10 years, by 75, we had 56. State arts agencies have enjoyed a significant partnership with the National Endowment for the Arts since the beginning. The NEA has beautifully seen that state arts agencies are a vehicle for extending its reach. And that's been the case since the beginning of the agency's work. And so in the earliest years, about 20% of the agency's grant dollars went to state and jurisdictional arts agencies, again, in expanding that service across the entire country. I'll say that that reach is significant, and we heard, I believe, Ayanna and Sunil talk about that reach a little bit earlier. But the states and the NEA together serve, of course, all the states, all the jurisdictions, 435 congressional districts, so all the districts, thousands of zip codes, and that work continues. Today, the federal-state partnership allocation allocates about exactly 40% of grant dollars to state, jurisdictional, and regional arts agencies, with 60%, of course, for national grants and national initiatives housed here in DC. Yeah, I can leave it at that for now.
Hi, everybody. I'm Erin Harkey. I'm the CEO of Americans for the Arts. And Americans for the Arts is one of the nation's leading arts advocacy organizations. We're non-discipline specific and have a very large mandate to advance culture throughout this very diverse and beautiful country of ours. The relationship with the National Endowment for the Arts has been very strong, and I think we are one of the leading advocates for the agency sort of writ large, right? So advocating with constituents, the public broadly in terms of promoting the benefits of this agency, but also doing a considerable amount of work on the Hill with our legislators to protect the agency in some very tough and critical moments. We've also been a close sort of programmatic partner. A lot of people have talked about the importance of the Creative Forces program. For some time, the Americans for the Arts was the administrator of that program. And we still, to this day, I think rely really heavily on the benefits of the agency's investment in our veterans as a key sort of talking point and messaging point for our sort of bipartisan advocacy. So yeah, it's been a really sort of collaborative and productive relationship over the years. And we continue to sort of work really closely with our colleagues at the NEA to make sure, right, that we are complementing the work of the agency through our research and our sort of programs portfolio.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to be here, but also thank you for the profound grace in which you've invited us all into this room. I really, really appreciate it. My name's Edgar Dobie. I'm the executive producer at Arena Stage, 75 years young this season. So we can't beat Utah, but we've been around for a while, for about 15 years before we began the journey to celebrate 60 years with the NEA. The NEA, one of my jobs as an executive producer is to try to build a resilient organization, try to build some resilience into our enterprise. And I look back over our relationship with the NEA, and there's a significant amount of treasure that's been made available to us over that 60 years. It's almost $8.7 million worth of grants, which you divide that by 60, it's makes you by any standards, a major donor. But beyond the grant making, there were some really significant pillars around building resilience. One of them we mentioned, that the matching grant formula was really important because that allowed us as a resident theater to make really important and what ended up being lasting relationships with the donor community. One of our first grants was to the Living Stage, which was a social justice program that we have. And it endures to this day, and it survived the 75 years because it got that support early on, the Living Stage. And water's important for resilience as well. And programs like insisting once they got us started that we needed to take a view of things like endowments, personal endowments, individual endowments, and making sure that those were in place. We're relying on those right now. So there's through that 75 years and the 60 years in the relationship with the NEA, there's some foundational ideas and support that have meant that we're here to celebrate our 75th anniversary in a building down in Southwest that was actually, we broke ground on that in 1960. So thank you.
Yes, amazing, thank you. So we heard a lot of, Sunil and Ayanna talked about lots of aspects to the NEA. I know a lot of people think it's a granting agency, and absolutely is a granting agency. We heard that it's also a partner to other departments of the federal government. It's a partner to states and local jurisdictions. It does convenings, it has research, there's a bunch of things going on. It really does punch way above its weight as a federal agency. But I think the other thing just to tease out is it helped create the nonprofit cultural infrastructure across the United States, that there was certainly representing in major cities, you had nonprofit arts organizations, but over its 60 years, it really was a catalyst. And I'm curious, I know that shows up, both state arts agencies are part of that evolution and revolution, the local arts agencies and Americans for the Arts. Talk a little bit about how the ecology sort of engaged or was fostered by not just NEA grants, but the presence of federal funding and support.
Well, I can talk a little bit about it from the local arts agency perspective. So before I came CEO of AFTA, I spent the majority of my career working in local arts agencies. So in Long Beach, LA County, and then moved to Chicago to run the cultural affairs department there. So I can tell you, right, that the sort of local arts agencies, and I believe this is also true, the states are really modeled right after the way that the National Endowment for the Arts is set up. So the National Endowment for the Arts is an important sort of marker, right, in establishing sort of best practices in terms of grant making and sort of program and strategy. And over the years, I have had the good fortune of being a sort of regranting partner in really critical moments, in sort of economic downturn moments, in COVID moments, right? The ability of the Americans for the Arts to funnel key resources into states and local governments for regranting has been a really critical lifeline. I'll also say, I think more personally, one of the most important programs that I believe in the sort of 20 plus years that I have been involved in the arts was the NEA Art Town program. It changed fundamentally, right, the way that we think, categorize, and fund culture in America. And I think, the ability not only of the arts to foster, right, local economies, right, but the sort of intrinsic relationship between the arts and all of the other things that we're trying to achieve in communities. It had two really important components that I think sort of made it sort of an amazing resource and really has changed, I think, the effectiveness of local government. One is that it required a local government partner. So if you were a nonprofit cultural agency that wanted to do something in your community, you had to partner with local government. So that could be the local arts agency. It also could be the parks department. It could be the planning department. It could be the Department of Transportation, which then started to sort of educate, right, the sort of local environment about the benefit and impact of the arts. It also required something else that was really smart and sometimes really hard to get. It required a letter of support from the chief officer of your municipality, which in my case was most often the mayor, right? So I had to explain to the mayor's office what we were trying to do, right? And so automatically you had an opportunity to get an ally, the most important ally, right, for the success of your project. And then the other thing that I think was really important is that it recognized the relationship between the arts and social service. And most communities in America, right, we're not talking about traditional infrastructure, right? We don't have museums, we don't have galleries, there's not necessarily a theater, but art happens everywhere, right? And so that sort of philosophical shift was a really important moment for culture in this country, because it gave as much weight, right, to the woman who's making tamales in the community as it did for the gallerist that is, having an art show, right? And we needed to rethink the way that we funded to meet culture where it lived, right? So I know that sort of changed, I think, the way that I thought about my job, but I think it really had a significant impact on the way that the field approached the work going forward.
When I think about how the NEA has helped this sector evolve, a couple of things come to mind related to state arts agencies. First, the federal-state partnership is really unique in federal government. In most federal agencies, when there's a block grant that goes to local governments or states, Those block grants are designed to meet federal mandates. And the NEA is very different when it partners with state arts agencies, right? Through that federal state partnership, those partnership awards go to states to meet state needs. And those needs are articulated by the people of the state, right? State arts agencies do strategic planning processes. The public is involved in those processes. Public input informs those plans, and that's what the NEA funds when it funds state arts agencies. So that's enormous in the evolution of how people, we can connect the dots between people in states and those federal dollars, right? Because that conversation has a through line. Certainly the NEA and states are both rigorous grant makers, but and they all do really incredible work in the grant making space. But when I think about other ways state arts agencies have evolved over the course of time, is that they've become really incredible policy entrepreneurs, right? They've become adept at working the levers of policy inside state government to better position the arts to serve the people, right? And there's so many examples of the policy levers being pushed by state arts agencies that have produced programs we now all know and love, right? So for instance, related to public art, about half of state arts governments, state arts agencies have percent for art programs, right? Percent for arts allocate some percentage, it's different in every state, but some percentage of funding for capital projects to include the arts, right? So these would be state facilities that are either being built or being renovated, but a percentage goes toward art in that space. And half the states, right, have been able to use the levers of policy to create those programs, which have been great for these public-facing and public use facilities, right? And great for the artists receiving these commissions, right? Another example would be one in the cultural district space, right? We have about 20 state arts agencies now managing cultural districts programs. Like the Percent for Art programs, these are legislatively enacted programs. And there's a through line for the NEA where the cultural districts programs are concerned. So much research, as Sunil talked about, is foundational to practice, right? The research informs new practice, and it was some particular NEA research that really helped to, I think, excite and inspire and inform more states and local communities to consider creative placemaking, right? In 2010, the NEA published Creative Placemaking. The NEA sent out a team of writers, researchers to explore communities across the country, large and small, rural, urban, all those in between, to really better understand the arts as a tool of community revitalization, right? Community economic revitalization, cultural, social revitalization, right? To understand it, to value it, to lift it up, and to give it a name. And they gave it a name, creative placemaking. I mentioned that 20 states have cultural districts programs. Half of those came online not long after creative placemaking was published. That built that excitement. So I think there are lots of ways that we can see the evolution of the arts through the work of the NEA, state arts agencies, and other partners, locals as well.
Nice. I'm going to put a little side spin on your question. So I certainly want to hear how this affected Arena Stage, but I also want to hear about the nonprofit theater didn't largely exist outside. I mean, Arena Stage sort of invented it along with Margot Jones and others. Speak a little bit about how the non-commercial or nonprofit theater either flourished because of or alongside of this federal investment.
Right. Arena Stage started in 1950 with two terrific ideas that sustain us to this moment. One was that storytelling, sharing a story is one of the most generous things we do as humans. And we do that in order to build empathy and to be generous in sharing that purpose. In 1950, the theaters that had been built to house the storytelling were accessible to all. They were primarily whites-only facilities. And so Zelda and Tom and Ed Magnum decided to make a place, first of all, where everyone would be welcome. It was a theater in the round. It had one door, one way to enter it. You looked through the action of the story that you were telling to see the community represented there. And then the storytellers were diverse as well. So that, but the second idea, and this harkens back to what Jane Alexander mentioned about the decentralization of the arts and the experience, and that was the idea of residency, that you have a connection in your community to the artists who not only make the art, but also support the idea of there being live theater in the community. So a revolution was started. That's how Zelda described it, a revolution in opposition to the idea of Broadway, of that being, okay, so we got, and connecting to the community, so that a show that was touring through here may be here for a week or 2 weeks. There was no way for that group of artists to easily connect with the community, with the schools, with the other art makers that had made a life here. So recognizing that idea and recognizing, as just to quote Zelda again, that theater, like museums and like universities and colleges, was an instrument, a true instrument of civilization. And that was recognized, I think, in the founding legislation of the National Endowment for the Arts. We now are quite happy to coexist with Broadway. We're quite happy now that we have the ability to make stories that want to be broadcast and shared with a whole nation, if not the international community. We're very happy that we've got a commitment to the artists that are making those stories. And that was all possible through the support and recognizing the significance of the purpose to be rooted in your community and to creating access to not only audiences, but also to the art makers that live in your community.
Beautiful, thank you. So we're taking a slow pivot from so what to now what, but it's a long now what. It's not just a now what. Because a couple of things just to flag here is, I mean, you're hearing all sorts of catalyst language here, right? So catalyst causes change and reaction without itself being consumed. It stays. And there's a catalyst in encouraging matching grants. There was a catalyst in the state arts agencies. It was a form of matching grants. In many cases, the NEA money was matched by the state, and that's how those state arts agencies were created. There were structures created, like if you really want to do this, you need to talk to your mayor or the official. That's a catalyst activity. There's just a bunch of things that happen beyond the budget. Obviously, the budget's important, but there's lots of things going on. And I guess the pivot to the now what is it hasn't always been a comfortable relationship of federal or state dollars supporting human creative expression, right? So if you could sort of share a couple of the places in our history where it became less comfortable or where it became an issue. It became an issue for people to say, hey, wait a minute, that's taxpayer dollars. There's an artist doing something I don't like, or why are we spending on this? Or what is the particular purpose? If we could sort of just raise up a couple of the moments in our history when it became a public debate of whether and how public money should be spent in support of the arts.
Yeah, we don't have to think very far back.
Way back in your memory.
I mean, You know, anytime times are tight, the budget's tight, right? The private sector can handle this, surely. Do we have to fund this? Do we have the capacity to do so, right? Whenever there's dissatisfaction with government in general and dissatisfaction with government spending in particular, that question comes up, right? Why should government fund the arts? You know, it does. And it creates tensions, and there are ways we reduce those tensions, and it all feels like an evergreen journey, right? Elected officials come in and go out of office. Appointed officials come in and go out of office. We all change in our positions. So there's an evergreen need to tell the story, right? To advance the narrative and to promote and educate about why it does in fact make sense for government to support the arts. You know, and it's not, here we go. Here's a little flag, and it's not just about the economy, folks, because my goodness, if our only reason for justifying public dollars was about our economic impact, then we'd be no different than any other sector. Many, many sectors can tout an economic impact, right? I love Sephora. I like the potions and creams. And I was at a Sephora recently, and I heard one of the clerks mention that that particular store, that standalone store, has a $25,000 a day target for retail, right? To bring in the dollars. So that if they're open 7 days a week, that's 25 grand a day. Sephora is about economic impact. That's good economic impact. We can tout that too, right? We know that the arts, for example, are responsible for a $36 billion trade surplus, which is critical for this country. But yes, that's right. That is something to celebrate. Thank you very much. And it's only one part of the story, right? Because unlike Sephora, we've got this significantly layered suite of policy-related benefits that are important for government support for the arts, right? And so it's not just about building the economy. It's about better education, right? It's about fostering community cohesion, right? It's about facilitating good health. And the arts do that in a number of ways. We heard some of them in the earlier conversation, right? Let's see, a good example. When science tells us, and it does, the research tells us that that many folks with chronic pain can turn to music therapy to help reduce that pain, and it reduces the amount of money they spend on pain medicine. That's also a policy issue, right? Because the federal government spends hundreds of billions of dollars on pain management alone, right? And so the arts are effective. It's in so many ways that impact policy, impact people, communities, et cetera. So it's that suite of benefits that the arts offer that are the ways, that are the keys to turning down that tension, right? Because when advocates can express these narratives and the science behind them, the research behind them, with a voice in harmony, then our policymakers can listen, and they do, and they have, and they fund the arts.
Well, I think there's a couple of pretty standard arguments that I think Pam alluded to. One is that the private sector could be doing this, right? And so public funding is not necessary. And I think Sunil, right, laid out masterfully, right, all of the reasons that that is actually not the case, right, in terms of just the geographic sort of distribution of public funding versus private funding. And the reason that it is because I got really kind of emotional when we read the sort of founding legislation. It was designed to do just that, right? And private funding is not designed in that way. I think there's also, you know, obviously sometimes some ideological arguments about what, right, the agency is funding or who the agency serves. And I think that is also, right, I think blown out of the water when you see and start to chart where these investments are actually going. Largest funder of the arts in rural America. This is not just a sort of elitist, right, sort of pursuit where funding is going to major institutions in large urban democratic centers, right? This is a very equitably sort of distributed source of funding for the arts in which all Americans really do benefit, right? So the data is certainly on our side. I think, you know, it's important perhaps to mention Culture Wars 1.0 in this conversation. And to say, right, that there have been, I think, formidable challenges that the agency has faced over time that we have gotten through. But those, you know, challenges, and I think those sort of compromises that, you know, Pam was alluding to do come with, you know, I think some consequences for the field. For example, you know, what happened previously had really significant impacts on the way that artists are funded in this country, particularly through public agencies. And because of that, I think we are woefully behind, right, in our understanding of how to support and value creative work, right? And so what we are doing now, and I think you'll hear a lot of us that work in the policy space are hyper-focused, right, on legislation and work that is going to support individuals and creative workers, because we have not been focused on that specifically and laser-focused at the federal level, and subsequently, as we have articulated, like federal policy gets mirrored in a lot of ways through state and sort of local governments. So just to say, right, that these challenges come, we are like prepared, right, to sort of deal with them and are armed with all of the case making that we need, but they do not also come without consequence, right? I think that we also need to understand.
I, I think I'd like to cite two examples. One is when the board of the Kennedy Center and the management of the Kennedy Center were summarily dismissed, that sent huge shockwaves through the district and the nation and possibly internationally. I know international companies were affected. The day that happened, we had an opening of a new play at Arena, and I mentioned in our welcoming remarks at Curtin that they didn't need to fear that we were a private, not-for-profit corporation that finds, nominates, and presents its board and its governing body. So we were immune to that kind of action. We weren't immune to the other tools and weapons that were available. But I think it was important that that the NEA has always supported that idea of agency and having your own form of governance. That's always been important. The second thing that I'm reminded of was the pandemic, which accelerated so many things, but just specifically in the sector that I operate in, resident theater, we were dealing with being under-resourced for the promises that we have made to our communities, and it was starting to catch up with us. And then the unthinkable happened. You know, the show must go on. Well, it had to stop, and it took a federal program of $16 billion to restart not just the not-for-profit theater, but also the commercial theater as well. But that brought into focus how those cultural enterprises are so core to that kind of vulnerability. And that's when you turn to a government. You turn to a government to solve those sorts of problems because of the value that we as citizens attach to that kind of activity. So, and in that case, I saw the district. We don't have a, did you hear that we don't have a state government here? We have a, yeah, we have a, yeah, we don't, but the way that our local government got involved with the federal folks, and again, I could see the hand of the NEA and the leadership in that solution to a very big problem, because you had the data, you had the research, you had the convenings in and around how important the not-for-profit sector was, and because it was getting across commercial and not-for-profit, it required a different kind of approach, and I was very impressed with how sometimes leadership is stepping to one side and supporting. So those were a few examples.
Yeah, those are great examples. And just to acknowledge, the NEA was among the agencies that moved a lot of money really fast through the shuttered venues program, through the payroll support, that having a network that already had access to many aspects was really important. So we're starting to uncover, I think, where part of the now what is sort of, the world is different, 1965 to now. A lot of things have changed. There's a whole nonprofit infrastructure that now is crossing the country and in many of these counties. There's government agencies, state, local, county, regional, and they exist, and sort of uncovering the remaining and unique use and application of taxpayer money and federal agency time and attention. I heard, and we heard in the interviews, if you go and you listen to all of them, yeah, even private philanthropy tends to be clustered around areas of wealth, right? So that you can say, well, the foundation should take care of it, or private donors should cover the difference. That $200 million doesn't make it, it's a drop, right? But it's quite powerful to say that there's actually a very unique, government money is more durable. It sticks around when foundations often pivot their attention and donors, as is their right to do. Commercial income, so a lot of nonprofits receive a significant earned income as part of their, that is also concentrated in areas of wealth. So I'm sort of pivoting to the question of two things. How are you guys making sense and taking action now? And are you finding a way of explaining the particular benefit and need in this moment for federal and maybe state and local taxpayer investment? So how are you guys making sense of this particular moment we're in now? Or are you making sense? Please tell me.
Okay, so that's a tough one. Thanks for that. Yeah, can I start with a moment of levity? Because when it's that tough and this tough, we need to have those moments to like breathe, laugh, breathe before we sort of get down to business, right? And so, you mentioned making sense, and it just made me chuckle, in part because it reminded me of something my board chair told me not long ago, and this was just something fun that she heard within her family. Maybe her dad told her that you can't really make sense out of nonsense. So you just inspired that memory. Thank you. And now that I've chuckled, I'm going to get down to business, because yes, we have to make sense of our place in this place and in this space and at this time, right? It's critical. Times are tough. Obviously, they're tough for the NEA, and because we all care so much, we become anxious, I think, about what we can do to make the situation better, right? And I think that that's important. That's natural, and it's really important to take a beat and to really be strategic, to try to be strategic about what you actually can do that can be of service, right? at NASA and with state arts agencies, we really try to approach every challenging moment from a position of considering what our unique strategic advantage might be, just because of our positionality, right? And so my strategic advantage and NASA's might be different from Americans for the Arts, different from Arena Theater, different from you. But when we bring our superpowers to bear from our unique strategic vantage points, then we can really make a difference, right? So, for example, when we at NASA advocate to members of Congress, we have a strategic advantage around the fact that we bring a government to government relationship to bear. So that's a different conversation, right? It's a distinct conversation from what nonprofits can bring, right? Government to government relationships are deep. And so we use that strategic advantage in advocating on behalf of the National Endowment for the Arts, the federal state partnership, and all the good we know these agencies can continue to do together. So think about your perch, right? We think about our perch and our strategic advantage to take effective action. Also, I think at this time and when times are this tough, it's important to really consider how we work in solidarity, right? How we come together toward common purpose, toward collective action, toward shared messages that can be effective to make a difference. So those are just two ideas there. Did you have two questions or did I cover it? Okay, great.
You want me to go? Oh, okay. Um, okay. Well, I want to say a quick thank you to somebody in the room, which will, I think, set up my answer to Jamie Bennett.
Yes, Jamie?
I don't know. I can't see him if he's here. Anyway, this was his idea. I think he had a conversation with you and came to me and then came to Pam and said we should, do this sort of 60th anniversary celebration. And I am not embarrassed to admit that I needed a little bit of convincing. And but I'm so glad. I'm so glad that we did this. And it was important, I think, when we saw the first draft of the videos come in from these esteemed and principled and sort of good people that have led and are continuing to lead this agency. It just was such a reaffirming moment of like how wholly right and just and good this thing that we have committed to is. So, I think that what I try to, I've been, traveling a lot and, talking to a lot of people throughout the country. And I think that we have to acknowledge, right, that there is some repair that needs to happen here, right? And I think that organizations need to continue to feel and believe that the Americans for the Arts is the sort of trusted leader that it has always been. And I think that will take some time and sort of effort, right, to continue to engage in that conversation in terms of how the agency continues to be a productive partner. But it is not the time to look away by any stretch of the imagination. Now is the time to sort of deeply invest and commit to the principles that established this agency 60 years ago. And so I think that's the message, right? And I think that's what we're, trying to do. And I think that it is also right to think about what the future requires, right? This is an agency that was established 60 years ago, to your point, right? This is a radically different looking ecosystem that is not just composed of nonprofits, right? That has Communities have individual and sort of specific needs that we need to be adapting to and listening to and continuing to adapt the models that we have to make sure that we're serving the needs of the people. And so I think that we should use this sort of inflection point as an opportunity to ask the question about how to be better, right? How to do this better. And the NEA is still, right, I think a very essential part in what that answer is.
As Arena continues to build, I think we're paying attention to the notion that what has been built is worth preserving and protecting, but not all of it. And so as we approached coming out of the pandemic, we developed a sharing mindset that we had a beautiful facility. We had a wonderful staff that we had largely been able to maintain. But we needed to, in a radical way, increase access to other members of the art makers in the community. And so we did. We invited Step Africa to be a resident company with us. They didn't have a home base here in the district. They'd been around for 30 years, but didn't have that. And DC Jazz had just made a relationship in the neighborhood with the Wharf and needed a somewhere where they could be performing more than outdoors and year round. So we had to step back a little bit from our ambition for the number of shows to create time in the calendar to share the facility, and also to share the expertise that our artisans and our everyone that supports the plays and the musicals that we decide to do. So I think that's an important hanging on and preserving what has been built through us 60 years of significant support and doubling down on that idea of access. We want to approach it to quote our new artistic director, in a radical way, radical access. And that includes rethinking how we share what has been created and the resource that we have.
All right, we're coming to the final question. I wonder, so there's people here in the room, there's people online. I'm hearing find your superpower and lean into it. So maybe your way of engaging this conversation is unique, finding that in your organization, in your life, in your work, in your networks. I'm hearing also an opportunity to align with many superpowers. There feels like a Justice League thing happening up here. Very powerful. If there's sort of a message of what you're hoping or hopeful for, and how you or others might take action toward that hope, it feels like a good place to bring us home.
Sure, I'll start with money.
Yay.
I'm hoping for a gigantic appropriation and appropriations to come for the National Endowment for the Arts, because it's time. And the arts merit it, right? The arts and public policy merit it. I think one of the ways we can get there is to lean in on something we've alluded to in all the conversations, and it started with Sunil and Ayanna, in the public sector collaborations that the NEA has advanced over the course of time. Those are, I think, a particularly important key to helping elected and appointed officials really understand the public policy value, the deep value of the arts across policy arenas. I think it's continuing to dive deeply into that work and then showcasing that work, whether we're talking about health or any other public policy area. I mean, health in particular, right? It's critical for all of us, right? The it's vexing work at every level, public, private, individuals. It's vexing. It's expensive. There's not one solution, and the arts are a part of the package. But I think it's leaning into those public policy areas that impact people's everyday lives that can get us closer toward growing the investments in the endowment, which are critical because at the end of the day, we don't get those public policy benefits for Americans without artists and arts organizations and arts businesses doing their part, right? We don't get the benefit of the music therapy, right? For the member of the military who needs that therapy without an artist. So so I think that's the through line. The public policy purpose, those cross-collaborative partnerships, those cross-sector partnerships across the federal government, really showcasing those toward an end of growing the investment substantially in the arts. That's how I want to see it.
I'm all +1 on more money. I'll just say that, we're in a super tricky budget situation. And, so now is the time to sort of dial up the advocacy. But what is most important and effective in this moment as you are reaching out to your legislators, and it's any legislator at any level needs to know, right, that this agency is important. And it's your personal story that will make the case, right? So we need to really be amplifying the individual impacts of our organizations on our local communities, to our veterans, right? To our school teachers, to our young people, to elderly folks in our community, right? We need to be connecting the dots between the work that all of you are doing in communities every day, to Pam's point, to the lives and how it affects the lives of everyday Americans. So your story matters more than anything else, right, in this moment.
I think one of our collective superpowers is that we know how to gather people. In the case of theater, to hear a good story, but what we create in the resident theater movement is perishable. So I think let's use our superpower to gather folks. And I can cite, I'm not going to right now, but I can cite so many examples of when we've done that, when we've brought an elected official, a decision maker into the process. You check a lot of your differences at the door when the lights go down and the curtain goes up. There's you're all in this one space. You're gathered and you have an opportunity to really embrace each other. And so I think let's continue to use that superpower to gather, and let's not squander any opportunity there is to get the decision makers in the room with us.
Right, extraordinary. So let's thank our panelists, please. Wow. Thank you. And thank Americans for the Arts, National Assembly, State Arts Agencies, and the Arts Management Program here at American University collaboration to bring people together. This is what it looks like, thank goodness. So a couple things are going to happen. If you're here in the in-person audience, there's going to be a reception in the museum right across the hall on the 3rd floor. I hear that the museum is available for you, but you can only have food on the top floor. So there will be people to help you over there. We're going to close with a short video, 2 minutes, don't worry. It's sort of a perfect little benediction to this moment. And then if you're online, please go to a catered event at your refrigerator, open it up and have a little snack. I hope you have some pedophores in there. And we're just so honored and grateful that you all made the time here and online to be in this conversation what I'm hearing here is that we're not necessarily trying to get something that was to keep going. We're trying to do what's next with the tools that have already been prepared for us. And so many of those tools are extraordinary. Some, as Edgar suggested, maybe we leave behind and we move into the next space. And that's all up to you. So please do that work. Here's the closer. I had a great short conversation with Joy Javits, who's the daughter of Senator Jacob Javits, the late senator. He was one of the co-authors or co-sponsors of the original legislation. And Joy really, really wanted to have his voice in the room. So she made a short little video for us. When this is done, we can all head over to the museum and enjoy some snacks. Let's play Joy. What a great name for this.
For 16 years, my mother, Marion Javits, researched all over the world the options for government supporting the arts. My father, Jacob Javits, senior senator, United States Senate of New York, charged her to do so, as she was the family arts impresario. He also loved ballet and theater and Jasper John's flag. On September 29, 1965, Lyndon Johnson signed the National Foundation on the Arts and Humanities Act. And my father was co-sponsor with Claiborne Pell. I'm going to read a few words that my father wrote about the arts. This is from his memorial book, as we lost him in 1986. This is what he wrote. It's called Endowing the Arts. As announced, we hope that our people and our nation will be recorded in history for more than our accomplishments, excellent as they are, in the fields of space, electronics, and other aspects of scientific and technological accomplishments. The land that produced inventors and scientists, explorers and pioneers, industrialists and builders also has given us the world's playwrights and composers, scholars and philosophers, and writers, poets, musicians, and artists. Our memorial to the generations to come is not alone in the significant libraries we have constructed, but with books we have written to fill them. We will be remembered not for our splendid museums and concert halls, but for our scholars, our artists, and our missionaries whose work are memorialized in them. Happy anniversary to the National Endowment for the Arts, and may there be 60 more years at least.